The field of 68 after dark. My name is Rob Dauster. We have a lot to get to in the world of college basketball. I know it was a big day in college football, but we got a lot to get to in the other sport, the other realm, the round ball. My name is Rob Dauster. I have with me tonight Kevin Sweeney of Sports Illustrated, who is apparently 23 years old. I did not realize that. And my man, Patric Young, the Florida Gator legend, SEC Network analyst. Gentlemen, how are we doing, man? How are we feeling?
Feeling pretty good. Feeling great. Can't complain.
Yeah, I'm not going to lie, Patrick. I'm not going to lie. I did some push-ups before I got on here because I knew you were going to come on, and I figured there weren't going to be any sleeves, so I had to get the swole going a little bit, right? I had to get a quick pump in.
I was trying to decide what I was going to do. I'm like, you know what? Rob will just love me being in a tank top again. Let's see how he I know that's what he expects. So I didn't want to let you down.
We got to have at least one guy that looks like he's in shape on the field of 68, right? Sweeney, what's going on, man? How you doing?
Hey man, it's like the last Saturday that's not like college basketball Saturday until March or until April. So no complaints.
Yeah, it was a good day. You know, it was the morning was a little bit of a damper. Team USA lost. That was I did not like that result. I got a little bit too into it. It is what it is. But we had Indiana Rutgers. We had a thriller in Wisconsin Marquette. We had a great game between Xavier and West Virginia. A lot of fun basketball. We're watching Houston St. Mary's right now. Kansas State is up on Wichita State. Before we get into any of those breakdowns, though, we got to do the first thing that we do on every After Dark episode, and that is our toasts of the night. Patrick, we are going to you first. Who's your toast of the night?
Had to bring out my swing. If you can see that, it's a swinging Gator Yeti bottle. It's the go-to. It's the GOAT. But tonight I wanted to look at young man Trevon Brazile, Arkansas. 23 points, 8 of 9 from the field, a few tray balls. Just been since last year. I've been high on him. Saw the flashes that he made. Just crazy when you go into the right system, how much your game can transform. And he's playing at a high clip right now. I think he is a first rounder at this rate, but we'll see how he finishes up going to SEC play. But tonight, Trevon Brazile, you're the man.
Cheers. Him and Naquan Tomlin, right? Those are the two guys they're riding with. Go ahead, Sweeney.
Well, I'll give my cheers to Yuri Collins, who had another insane assist day today. Big kind of mid-major game, Southern Illinois, St. Louis. Those campuses aren't that far apart. And Yuri had 14 more assists. He had 20 assists in a game earlier this week against Tennessee State. He's now averaging like 12 assists a game, putting up some just unreal numbers for this St. Louis team that looks like the class of the A-10. So cheers to Yuri Collins setting records.
Cheers. He had 20 assists and a single turnover, one turnover and 20 assists, which is one of the crazier stat lines I think I've ever seen. All right, my toast is going to go out to a local kid from where I am. I live in Mount Laurel, New Jersey. Lenape High School is our local high school, and there is a kid from Lenape, a freshman at Rutgers right now. His name is Derek Simpson. There wasn't a ton of expectation on him. He picked Rutgers, the hometown school, over Arizona State and a bunch of mid-majors. He missed his first 6 shots tonight, came out in the second half, scored 10 straight. That pushed a 38-37 lead to 48-47. Rutgers ended up beating number 10 Indiana in the rack, and Derek had all 14 of his points in the second half. So cheers. That's the local kid. You got to root for the local guys always. So cheers, Derek Simpson. There you go. All right, let's get straight into it. Rutgers 63, Indiana 48. The Scarlet Knights. Sweeney, I saw this stat. I think it was the guys over at Heat Check that put this out. In the last 3 years, Rutgers is 10-3 at home against top 25 opponents. How does this keep happening?
I mean, I think they beat the Knicks at the rack at this point. It's just it's unbelievable. The mojo that they have in that building is just ridiculous, and there's nothing like it right now in college basketball. Like, there's not a home court advantage more scary than that barn in Jersey. And I mean, look, I thought today the biggest difference for this game compared to what Indiana has done so far was Rutgers got into them, and they were physical. They kind of switched it up defensively a little bit, made Indiana uncomfortable, made Xavier Johnson, who's had a really good start to the year, very uncomfortable. He turned it over 6 times. And I think you finally saw a team that matched Trace Jackson Davis on the block with Omori, who I know he had some foul trouble, but they just sent bodies at him and made Trace's day not an easy one. And they just find ways in that building to out tough you and hang in the game, and eventually they're going to make their run, and the crowd isn't going to stop it. And I was just, again, so impressed with them. They're still getting healthy, right? I mean, McConnell missed time earlier in the year. He's back, had a really good day today. Mulcahy's still coming off the bench. Still seems like he's on a pitch count, 24 minutes today. But you mentioned, Rob, Simpson, who another one of these under the radar freshmen in the Big Ten who has stepped up and made a big impact. He's really helped them, given them another guy who can go create some offense, which I think was so critical on paper with this group. But they're tough, they're physical, and I wouldn't want to see them at the rack.
Yeah, no one can beat them there. Patrick, what is it about home court environments like that can kind of rattle a road team? You've played in some of the loudest ones. Hell, the place that you played, the O-Dome, when you guys were great, that place is rocking. So what is it about those home court environments that kind of gets the team?
Well, if you want to be technical, home court advantage shouldn't matter. It shouldn't, but this is college basketball. I remember playing at the rack. This would have been my junior year. And goodness gracious, I think we were playing against an unranked Rutgers team, but it was as though we were playing against a team that had an unbelievable amount of confidence. And I had flashbacks watching the game. And I think that was before Mike Rosario transferred and came to Florida. So not great memories I have being at the rack. But when it comes to having that home court advantage, you just have so much more, confidence that you're going to protect your basket. You're going to play to another level. And it should travel because this Rutgers team, they are overall number one defense in the Big Ten right now. They are holding teams to a lead to 48 points on average, or 54 points on average right now. But they go down to Miami and they weren't able to hold that same thing. They come into a game, they bounce back. I'm looking at Indiana. I'm saying, where's the help? Miller Klopp, he was great. Smooth shot. He was 5 of 9 from the 3-point line. If you take him away from the rest of this game, it's 1 of 16 for Indiana from the 3-point line. That's 6%. So it's really difficult to win if you can't get someone else that can knock down at least two or three 3-pointers outside of one guy. The trap, the defense on Jackson Davis was awesome. Derek Simpson, oh my gosh, as you said, he was a difference maker when he came off the bench. He was a firecracker. Overall, really impressed with Rutgers. They're gonna beat a lot of good teams at home this year. Just a matter of, is it going to travel for them in this tough conference?
Yeah, what they can do at home, I think, is going to make up for a lot of some of the losses that they took early on this season, right? They lost. Let me bring up the schedule, make sure I have it in front of me. They lost to Temple, which is not a great loss. Then lost at Miami, like you mentioned, Patrick. And I think what they can do at home is going to make up for some of that. I was just really impressed with how seamlessly Caleb McConnell, he was back, and Paul Mulcahy getting back into the rotation was able. They were able to just come in and play, and it wasn't like they missed any time. So that's a really, really good basketball team, especially when they're playing at home. Sweeney, let me ask you about Indiana, because they came into the season quite a bit of hype. Probably the Big Ten favorite, I would say, heading into the year. Climbed all the way up into the top 10. They still got 13-10 from Trace Jackson Davis tonight, but they lost by 15 points. Was this just something that happens on the road in conference play? Is this something that we probably shouldn't overreact to, or is this just kind of a sign like this is why you need to worry about a team that has Xavier Johnson at the point? He finished 2 for 11 from the floor, 6 turnovers. Not a great game.
Yeah, I mean, I think if this game was played in January or February, it wouldn't have the noteworthiness that it does right now because it is so early. We're still kind of gathering data points, if you will, on these teams. But like I think if you were convinced that Indiana could win the Big Ten championship before today should not dissuade you. And if you were convinced that they weren't going to be good enough, today is just going to be fuel for your fire. But I don't think you should change your mind over this game because it is so hard to win at the rack. Like the teams that they beat last year in that building, they beat Iowa. They held Iowa last year, one of the best offenses in the country, to 46 points. Excuse me. They beat some really good teams at the rack last year. They beat Michigan
They've gotten
State.
Purdue the last 2 times they played Purdue. They've gotten Purdue Illinois the last 3 times they played Illinois. Like they're basically the prime warriors.
Yeah,
they're playing in that building.
They lost by 35 to Illinois at Illinois and then beat Illinois by 11 at the rack. Like you just don't beat them there. And so I just think like I wouldn't be too worried. I think you saw some of the issues that this Indiana team can have with teams that can match them physically. I thought they also really missed Jalen Hood-Schifino today because his ability, especially in the Carolina game, to attack the basket, but also be a pest defensively and just really disrupt a lot of Carolina's actions. I think they missed that in this game. But at the end of the day, you're not going to win a lot of games when you score 48 points. And especially when 21 of those are scored by Miller Kopp. Like if you told me at the beginning of the game, like if I'm Rutgers, like Miller Kopp can have his 12 shots. Like Miller Kopp's the one guy in the lineup. I know he can make shots from three. I know he's a really good shooter, but he's the one guy that does not scare me. If I'm looking at the scouting report, I'm seeing Xavier Johnson, Trace Jackson Davis, and in most days, Jalen Hood-Schifino, and Tamar Bates off the bench, and Malik Renew, the outstanding freshman. Like all those dudes, all those weapons. If Miller Kopp's the one who beats me, I'm going to live with it. And I just think Rutgers was great next to executing their game plan. So I don't think Indiana's like a true national contender, like a team that I see winning a national championship, but I think they're good enough to compete at the top of the Big Ten, to compete for that conference crown. And I don't think today should change your mind on that.
Yeah. Who else do you think is in that mix, Patrick? Because we've seen a lot of Big Ten games so far this season. On Friday night, Maryland took down Illinois in their own building in one of the better games that we've seen so far this season. Purdue has looked unbelievable so far this year. So how do you see the top of the Big Ten shaking out? Because I think that is I would say probably the most competitive league race, because I think there's a lot of really good teams. I don't know if there is a great team, and there's no one that I'm going to sit here and plant my flag in the ground right now.
You don't like Purdue being a great team right now?
I think that Purdue is very, very good right now. And I think a lot of that is because Matt Painter has these guys ready to play. And I don't think people were necessarily expecting how good their guards are going to end up being. I want to see what happens as teams kind of figure out, okay, you can pull Zach Edey away from the basket. Okay, let's get him running up and down the floor. Let's get him having to defend ball screen actions and tire him out. I think that there's a way that you can beat them. And I also think that their really impressive wins over Duke and Gonzaga are significantly less impressive than the rankings would say that they were right now. I think that's a different conversation to have about Duke and Gonzaga, but I think both of those teams are like borderline top 25 right now, as opposed to top 10.
Well, I think the formula for having a great team that's going to make a run is obviously a dominant big man. The ball is going to touch the paint, and then have a point guard that's going to take care of the ball. I loved how Braden Smith in that Florida State game, they just had such a great two-man game. Just finding, he did such a great job finding Zach Edey. He has such great hands. I mean, goodness gracious. I definitely would have had problems trying to guard this guy. Because
let me, how do you played basketball as a 5-man at a high level? What do you do with a guy that big? Like, how do you guard him?
Man, you
send up a couple Hail Marys and just say, I hope he misses.
Well, the issue is with him is that he has such great touch with a longer, more range on his hook shot. So the idea with a guy that big, zero chance if he seals you under the basket, as we know. So you fight, you're not going to front him. You're going to try to get him off the block as best you can. So you're going to be working your butt off the whole game, just trying to not allow him to get close position. But it was one play against Florida State. He got it on the block. Someone tried to steal it, pump fake, didn't put the ball down, kept it high, and just ripped the rim down. And I'm like, I don't know how anyone stops that. That's just, he's blessed to be, this is what he's made to do. Just dunk on everybody without having to dribble and take up so much space. So, but as you said, try to get him in positions where he's going to foul, but he's always in a drop on pick and roll. But create that contact on him first, try to get him off balance. Getting him out of the game is going to be the best way. Like, look at a team like Kentucky. You take Oscar Tshiebwe out of the mix, they're a completely different team. Zach Edey's off the court, completely different team. That's your best bet in trying to upset a team like Purdue.
Let me ask you one more question. You said that you wouldn't front him, someone that size. Is it just because it's too easy for him to kind of wedge you out and seal you too far up the lane and that lob? I mean, I don't know how you help on the weak side when you got a guy that's 7'4". He's going to catch it above it where anyone can get. Is that just what it is?
No, I mean, if you do front, that help side needs to be first off, it's got to be someone that's going to be long and gets there on the catch, like literally. But he's shown that even with that happening, he does not get phased with someone being in his face to still finish right over you. So, you can pick your poison there. Maybe with his hands being so good, and I can't stop emphasizing that, seeing a big man that catches the ball so well, can keep it high, has soft touch, because that is very, there's so much pressure a defense was going to put on you when you get that. And he doesn't get sped up. It's just a matter of if he misses. That's why I would suggest just trying to push him off the block and force him baseline to trap then. because anything in front of the basket, there's no chance.
Yeah, the biggest thing to me is you just can't let him get good position, right? If he's going to hit 12-foot jump hooks, then you just got to live with that, right?
Gotta live with it.
It is what it is. But if you let him get it 4 feet from the basket, like he's literally putting you through the basket stanchion, and there's nothing you can do. All right, Sweeney, I don't know if this is a hot take, but I do think that Illinois is the team that has the highest ceiling in the Big Ten. But I'm kind of coming around on Maryland like being good enough to make a run at a Big Ten title. Is that crazy?
I don't think it's crazy because I think their starting five is maybe the best starting five in the league. Like I know they have like the bench is questionable. They don't get a ton of scoring certainly from their bench, but that starting five is really talented and it fits extremely well together, right? You have a point guard in Xavier Young who can create offense for himself and ball screens, hasn't even shot it great, but is a guy who we know can make shots. That's the thing that I think is most scary about Maryland is that Xavier Young and Don Carey are both shooting under 30% from three. We know those guys can really shoot it. Like Don Carey shooting 25% from three. Last year, he made 65 threes at a 39% clip. The year before, he shot 45% at Georgetown. Like this guy can really shoot it. The fact that Xavier Young and Don Carey aren't shooting it great right now, and this Maryland team is as good as it looks, that should scare you because Dante Scott's playing at an extremely high level. Julian Reese is playing at an extremely high level. He is not in the conversation yet nationally about the great bigs in this league in the Big Ten. But night after night, I think he's going to prove that he is right there. Maybe not in the scoring department, the way that you would feed the rock to a guy like Zach Edey or Trace Jackson Davis. But in terms of his impact on the game, blocking shots, rebounding at an extremely high level, shooting 77% from the field, like I think he is probably the most underrated player in the conference. And I think when you have two outstanding players like Reese and Scott, a great wing and Hart, and then guards who can make plays and shoot the ball in Young and Carey, and that starting five is dangerous. So I agree with you that Illinois has got a ton of upside because they're deeper and they're probably more talented on paper than anyone in this league.
To me, it's the fact that they're basically matchup proof, right? If you need to have a big five man out there, you could put welcome to the danger zone out there. If you need to have a mobile five, you put point center Coleman Hawkins on the floor, and he's going to go out there and drop triple doubles on you. So they have talent, they have shot makers that can give you different looks. Sometimes they're going to lay an egg because that's just kind of what that Illinois team is going to end up doing at times, but their ceiling is just so incredibly high. And I know that producer Trevor, big time Illini fan, is loving this conversation right now. I want to pivot really quick because we did see another team in the Big Ten play tonight that looked really good. Wisconsin, Chucky Hepburn, went nuts in the first half, had 16, did something. I don't even know if we know exactly what he did. He looked like he might have pulled a groin. He went off limping 5 seconds into the second half, shows up with 8 minutes left in the game, is clearly not himself, but he's still hitting 28-foot step back daggers. And Wisconsin goes into Fiserv Forum and knocks off a Marquette team that had just beat Baylor by 26 on what was that on Monday night, Tuesday night, whatever it was. So Patrick, what do you make of the Badgers, man? I was a little bit down on them coming out of Atlantis, but that performance right there kind of made me stand up and say, you know what, this team is pretty good, man. Chucky Hepburn,
good, right? Yeah, I mean, for the most part, the game was in Wisconsin's hands early on. I thought Chucky Hepburn was going to go for 30 at least, unstoppable, dominant, perfect in that first half. And again, to your point, to come in after being out for that long, cold, injured. Just finding a way that shows great leadership for this and making the assist to Tyler Wall. To Tyler Wall to
say Connor's last name. Say his last name.
Is it Wall?
a Cegian? Is that right? So what is it? A Cegian?
A Cegian.
Oh yeah, I wasn't going to try to say that.
Hey, whatever his name is, man, just call him a stud because that dude can play.
Yeah, he really stepped up when Chucky was out. That's the thing. When your stud goes out, how is the team going to weather the storm? Because Marquette, you look at the paper of this game, it was pretty close. Like all the stats were almost literally right there. The free throw line, the 3-point line, there wasn't too much of a glaring difference. But it just came down to making those big plays at the end and Chucky having the opportunity to do that for the team. But that's the thing is if he's out for an extended period of time, and that lead minimized. It became a game because at the half you're up by 11 at the half, and then Marquette goes on, they win that second half. But obviously Wisconsin went on to win the game. I don't know. They've had an opportunity to mix it up in the Big Ten as well.
This was an encouraging performance for me for Wisconsin because I think it was probably the first time all year where you felt like all of their guards and Tyler Wall all had good days, right? Hepburn in the first half, Esigian, who's been great off the bench, he had 12 in this game. Klesmit had the winning bucket. He was really solid. They love that kid. He can really shoot it, but he's got some toughness to him. He can defend. And then Wall, who has been up and down with his efficiency, but is their best player on paper, does so much for them. He can really pass. It was really the first time all year that I've watched them that all those guys had good days offensively. Because the thing that holds me back with this Wisconsin team, and the reason I don't think right now I view them in the same tier as Wisconsin and Indiana, and maybe even or not Wisconsin, Illinois and Indiana, and potentially like Maryland, is they just struggle to generate easy shots offensively. And they've got enough guys who can make a shot from deep. And today they go 12 for 27. I think they were 12 for 28 against Wake Forest. But they don't get to the rim and get easy looks very often in their offense. And that's because their guards are not necessarily guys who can separate and get downhill and get to the basket. Like Hepburn's really good. He's really tough. He makes difficult shots. He's clutch. I mean, he had some, I remember the buzzer beater he hit against Purdue last year to win the Big Ten back in March. Like, the kid's awesome, but he's not a shifty point guard who you're just going to like roll out and play ball screens in and let him get it downhill and create. That's not his game. Their best offensive creator is Tyler Wall, who's their four-man. He had 1 assist and 5 turnovers today. So I think that that's the one thing that holds me back with this group. But this is a great win on the road against the Marquette team that just does such a good job of making you uncomfortable. And for Wisconsin to score 80 points, to put up over 1.1 points per possession against the Marquette team that is just so good defensively at getting you out of your rhythm and taking you out of your flow, that's really impressive for a team that has struggled offensively this year.
I'm waiting for a complete game from Wisconsin because I feel like we've seen them be just dominant defensively, right? The Dayton game stands out to me. I thought that they were really good defensively against Kansas in that overtime game that they lost. And we've seen them have big offensive performances, right? I thought they looked pretty good against Wake Forest. I thought they looked great for the moments when Chucky Hepburn was on the floor against Marquette. The last 2 games, they've really struggled on the defensive end. And to me, like, if you can be that defensively, and we know you can be that offensively, at some point, everything's going to come together. Yeah, right? Like, I don't think that you can be that that kind of hot and cold on both ends of the floor. So that's why I'm sitting here. Like, I think that there's something there where if they can get it all together, they can be a really good team. And I think some of that is a lot of new guys and new roles, right? I think some of that is kind of figuring out different lineups. Do you want to play Tyler Wall at the 5 and kind of go small? How much do you want to roll Stephen Kroll out there, right? So I think that they're still kind of figuring some things out. And to your point, I think the biggest X factor for this group is going to be how well Greg Gard can scheme shots. Because what you said, Sweeney, in terms of not necessarily having like a go-to guy, having someone that you can just give the rock to and know you're going to get a bucket, is a big red flag to me. And I know I'm saying that after seeing Chucky Hepburn. Like, all he had to do was just take a little step back and shoot a 35-footer, and like he wasn't even hitting the rim, man. Like, he was putting those up, and it was just like, yeah, that's gonna. You know that sound on the TV when it's just you hear the net and then it hits a little button on the back of the rim. It's like ching. You know exactly what it was going to end up being when he shot it. That's the best sound of basketball, Patrick.
Speaking of Stephen Kroll, he had 7 assists today, so let's not sleep on that. The big fella.
He can really pass. He can really, really pass, and he can stretch it a little bit, which I think is huge for their offense. Like he gets to a game basically where he just leaks out for a little pick and pop, and they don't guard you. He needs to be able to make that shot for this team because their margins offensively are not very big, just because they don't have that high level creation. But yeah, absolutely right, Rob. Like, they have to be able to scheme shots, and I think in big opportunities, the fact that they were able to get timely buckets when they needed it today is a good sign that they're headed in the right direction on that front.
Yeah, and I think that the ceiling is only going to go higher with, like, as Connor Esigian kind of grows into what he is going to end up being. And Greg Gard is, I think, proven himself enough that we can just kind of blindly say he's gonna figure out a way to make them be. I don't know if they'll win the Big Ten, but I think they're going to be relevant in that conference race. And I think they're probably going to be a mainstay in the top 25 for a while moving forward. All right, real quick, just like give me 1 minute, Sweeney, on what you think of Marquette and Patrick, you two, because I'm still all the way in on this team. And And with the context being, I think they're a tournament team with top 25 upside, but they're definitely, to me, they're not quite at the same level as UConn or Creighton in the Big East, and I think they're probably just a tick below Xavier to me. But I think that they are, for me, if I was doing the power rankings in the Big East, I'd probably have them fourth today.
I would really think about putting him ahead of Xavier. I think it's close. Maybe it's just because I was in Milwaukee on Tuesday when they played better than I think even their fans would have imagined they would play against Baylor. I mean, they were just dominant. I really like this group, though. I think the things that stand out for me, one, are the ability to create difficult matchups when they go smaller with Omax and David Joplin at the 4 and the 5. Like against Baylor, they pulled Flo Thamba away from the basket. They put Ojiawuna, the freshman, in all sorts of trouble defending ball screens because they just got him out in space and then attacked matchups. And those guys are 6'8", 220. They can handle the ball. They can stretch it. I know Omax only shot, I think, 1 for 7 today, but he can shoot the ball. He's a threat out there. I love those matchups that they can create when they take Oso off the floor. Igudero, who's a big kind of shot blocking guy, a big man who can move. He moves really well. He can pass a little bit, which I think is really valuable in their offense.
To get the ball more.
Yes. Mm-hmm. It's not really there. It's not there. Like they don't run through the post a lot, but I want to find him touches because he can pass and he can keep the ball moving. He's
crafty. He's a little crafty.
Absolutely.
When I talked to Shaka in the preseason, he made a lot of comparisons to Draymond Green in terms of like short roll stuff and running offense through him at the top of the key and just letting his playmaking and passing ability be the thing that spaces the floor, right? Instead of just having to rely on having a bunch of shooters out there, get him at the top of the key, pull the big man away from the basket and run cuts, get screens going to find ways to get the defense. Well, Patrick, are you there on Marquette too?
Yeah, no, I'm definitely there. And I just think when I'm thinking about Marquette and thinking about Shaka, man, doesn't it look like a little bit of that old VCU? Like he's got his swagger back a little bit, turning Baylor over 20 times. He forced Marquette into 15 turnovers, or Wisconsin to 15 turnovers tonight. But that's a big part of their game. Omax, they slowed him down a bit from that game against Baylor where he had 24. But I am high on this Marquette team. I think they have a really, especially starting on that defensive side. I think if you can bring that disruption, really exploit teams and put them in players in places where they can't be comfortable, not allow a lot of easy shots. It's only going to help you on the other side offensively. But I think just that disruption, being able to do what they did against Baylor, obviously nobody expected that. I think they are certainly a tournament team, and I don't know how far they can go. We're going to need to be a little bit more efficient, but it's early. Guys still getting a chance to figure out their roles. David Joplin had 19 points off the bench against Baylor, only had 7 today. He's going to need some bench production as well, but good to see.
I almost hit a game-winning 75-footer. Did you see that? They showed the shot from behind. At the end of the regulation, he had a shot from the opposite foul line that was on line and hit like the top of the square. If he had, if it was like 1 foot shorter, he would have banked in a 75.
He'd have 10 then.
Yeah. All right. I'm going to mix it up a little bit. Producer Trevor is going to be mad at me for jumping around on the rundown, but since you brought it up, Sweeney, Xavier, they hung on. They beat West Virginia. They were down by, I think it was 11 late in the first half. They came back to win. I'm still very concerned about what Xavier can be defensively, but I think the fact that they have Sean Miller there, who's a proven winner, and they have like all of those dudes offensively, I think that their ceiling is really high. So where do you stand on Xavier after watching them hang with? I mean, look, the big question for me was toughness with that group, and they just beat one of the toughest teams in college basketball coming from behind.
Yeah, and they took a punch to do it. I think that's the biggest thing that I think stands out about this performance today. Yeah, I would worry about them defensively, and I don't think it's something that's going to necessarily get better just because of personnel, right? Like when you're going to play Adam Kunkel, Jack Nungy, and Zach Fremantle big minutes, you're probably, and Sule Boom for that matter, you're probably not going to be that good in a defensive team. Like Colby Jones can guard, but like there's not a lot of dudes on this team that really want to get down and get in the stance, and that's okay, right? Like that's the roster he was, like Sean Miller was dealt. Like this is not the team he built, and he's, I think, doing the most with what he has. I think the thing that stood out to me when I was at PK85 watching them, and again today when he had another terrific game was how much further along Sule Boom is at point guard. I mean, this is a guy who's been a scorer his whole career, more than necessarily a point guard. Back his first year in college basketball, he was a 1 assist a game guy. He was a chucker. Is what he was, and not in a bad way. Like that dude could get buckets. He always been able to put the ball in the bucket, but he was a chucker, and he has gradually gained confidence in a more ball dominant role and has just scaled up so well to high major basketball. He's getting to the free throw line at a really high clip. He's been efficient. He's getting teammates involved. I think he's still getting comfortable there, but to have 7 assists and 3 turnovers against a defense that is so high intensity and so high pressure today, like West Virginia, that's a huge step in the right direction. Against Joe Toussaint, no less. I mean, Joe Toussaint's one of the best on-ball defenders in college basketball. For you to go get 23 and 7 and do it efficiently, that says a lot about Sule Boom. It is so hard to be a transfer point guard. It is in your first year in college basketball. We see some guys every year who bust, some guys who boom, and for pun intended here, Sule Boom's been booming for the Xavier Musketeers.
Oh man, you need to do that one a little bit cleaner.
I didn't. I know.
You have to run it back.
I had to run that one back.
Yeah, you had the perfect setup, and then you just couldn't quite finish it, man. But Patrick,
B- execution.
Yeah,
I felt that right in the heart when you talked about a senior point guard transferring and not picking it up yet. When I'm looking at Kyle Lofton over at the Gators, that he hasn't found that, and I loved his game. They're very high on him coming into the season. Just hasn't been there yet. And I was looking back at the stats of the Xavier Florida game. Lofton in that game ended up only having 4 points, where Boom had 22. That was, I mean, gosh, he looks so good. I didn't know the kid, but the way that he's handling himself as a senior guard for this Xavier team, I was thoroughly impressed, especially with Colby Jones. The way that he shot it from they shoot the ball at a high clip with such great confidence. In that game, that game with Florida was the first time I really got a chance to see him, and I'm like, man, they are much higher than their ranking, because there was nothing Florida could do to slow them down offensively.
Yeah, the big thing for me with Xavier is they're not going to reach their ceiling until Des Claude and Cam Kraft end up being guys that can be consistent, like 20 to 25 minute contributors, and it doesn't feel like they are just out there because you need someone to eat the minutes to give a rest to the starters, right? You need them to be better than they have been. And I know that staff is incredibly high on those two, and they think that long-term they are going to be very, very successful, like 3 to 4 year players in that Xavier program. It's hard when you only got really 5 or 6 guys that you can trust. It's hard to be able to play an entire Big East basketball season. I mean, you play home and homes, you got 20 conference games, right? It's going to be a grind, and you need that depth to develop. And I think that's where, like, we kind of know what the other guys are. I think that's where the ceiling comes in. I also just want to say, like, I think West Virginia is really good.
They got to stop fouling so much, man.
That's what they do. That's what they do.
If you can't make threes, I mean, they started out hot, but if you can't rely on your 3 ball, you can't foul so freaking much and send Xavier to the line 30 times.
Sound like a coach right now.
Yeah.
they'll be good.
Without fouling. Come on, that's it. That's all I'm asking.
All right, staying in the Big East, Villanova picked up a big win tonight. This afternoon, they knocked off Oklahoma at the Wells Fargo Center, which was rocking, by the way. They had that place packed. There were probably like 15,000 Villanova fans in there. And the big thing was, the headline is probably that Cam Whitmore made an appearance. 7 points off the bench. He only played 20 minutes, but like, it was a loud 7 points. Sweeney. He had the first shot that he hit was like a step back 3 where he went between the legs and created space. He had a couple nice finishes around the bucket. I think he's going to be better than I thought he would be, if that makes sense, right? I think he's going to come in and be like a 14 to 15 point per game guy once he kind of gets up to speed. And I do think that this kind of changes the calculus a little bit for Villanova. They lost 4 straight games coming in. One of those was to Portland, and one of those was to an Oregon team that had 6 scholarship players and played a walk-on for 25 minutes. And look, Oklahoma lost to Sam Houston State. This is not like the Oklahoma team that Jeff Capel had when Blake Griffin was there. but that's a good, tough Big 12 team that's going to end up being probably a top 50 win at the end of the day because of how balanced and deep the Big 12 is. So where do you stand on Villanova now, Sweeney?
It was a much needed win. Like they had to have this at 2-5 at home. Like you don't come back from this if you go 4 games under 500 and you're staring on a Big East schedule. I just think it was gonna be really hard, and they needed it. I thought Whitmore just gave them another threat offensively. I think it's been so hard watching them where they do sort of a Villanova type thing, right? They get a post up and they force you into rotations, swinging the ball around. And there's just not the guy there to make the shot. There's not the guy to make the play, to make the decisive play that has been such a hallmark of how good Villanova has been offensively. And Whitmore gives me another option, another guy who can attack a defense, who can get off the bounce. He looked a little bit better shooting the ball than I thought he was billed at, and I think that's really huge for this team for the spacing. And it also meant that you didn't have to play Angelo Brizzi, right? And Angelo Brizzi might be a good player at some point in his Villanova tenure, but right now he's not ready to really contribute at a high level. And his minutes were rough minutes for Villanova. So the more minutes you can play Whitmore and Jordan Longino, and the less you have to play Brizzi and Archie Diacono and Mark Armstrong, these are young players, right? Like Armstrong and Brizzi and Brandon Housen are young. They are going to develop and potentially be useful pieces for this Villanova team right now. But those guys were thrown into the fire for where they were early in the season. And I think Whitmore is just physically a lot more far along, and he's skilled enough to, I think, really make an impact. So this
you know what else it does? It gives you a 6'6", 7-foot wingspan, athletic, switchable defender.
Yeah.
And they've struggled defensively, including today. They were not great defensively against an Oklahoma team that struggles to score. There were some rough moments defensively, but they got stopped. I thought the key stretch in this game was in the first half when Oklahoma punched them in the mouth early. Then when they went up 20-9, and you're like, okay, not this again, right? You're 2-5. You're down 10 on your home court against an Oklahoma team that's good, but lost to Sam Houston State is not great, and you're just rolling your eyes. I'm like, how is this going to go wrong for us today? And they got a 7-minute scoring drought out of Oklahoma that let them get back in the game, let them get their footing offensively, and then they were able to hang in the second half to find a way to win the game. That was the decisive stretch, was not letting that thing get out of control in the first half.
Patrick, any takes?
Oh, I would just love to see Villanova's offense take more than 44 shots in a game. That kind of was a little frustrating in the sense of getting some offensive production. But to your point, Sweeney, a lot of guys being thrown in the fire. That's difficult. I would love to. I believe Cam Moore is going to be the quote unquote savior of this team offensively and defensively. With the confidence that you come in, I mean, he's been itching to get out there and help this team turn things around. Hopefully, he can be that spark. He's not looked at as a top 6 pick for any random reason. The kid can play. The kid is ready to go right now. And awesome to see Jay Wright back in the building. Yeah, good for them to get that win there. But understanding how their offense flows, I just would love to see it getting a few. I'm a volume guy. I want to see it going. So those slow styled offenses just kind of just drive me crazy. But with Cam Whitmore getting back in the lineup, and I know you want to transition over to Nick Smith Jr. over in the SEC.
Go ahead, take it away, man. You're the host now.
Yeah, I mean, for me, obviously, it's everyone's first chance getting to see Nick Smith Jr. And what I loved about him coming into the season, you're thinking who's going to fill in that spot for this offense after losing someone like J.D. Notae. And Nick Smith can do it. J.D. Notae was so ball heavy, dominant, needed to have the ball in his hand, not doing a lot of things off the dribble. Nick Smith Jr., he can stay in the corner, stay off the ball, because you got Anthony Black, who has been sensational this year. I wasn't so high on Anthony Black. I didn't think he was going to be as good of a playmaker. He shut me down ASAP. I'm a huge fan of him. I was wondering, how is Nick Smith Jr. going to fit into this lineup by playing off the ball as he has been doing? He's smooth. He takes great shots, good looks. Obviously, in this first game, he had a lot of nerves, wanting to come out there and prove himself especially going against a team that shouldn't be anywhere close to the level of what Arkansas can bring to the table. The game did get a little bit competitive for a second, as you mentioned earlier, Rob. But Nick Smith Jr., as soon as he finds his flow, He's going to help this Arkansas team that's already shown that they are a legitimate contender. I think he can put them over the edge of being that Final Four team this year.
You know what really stood out to me is that when he came in, he had when it was still a game, right? About a third of the way through the second half, he had 14 field goal attempts, and nobody else on the Arkansas roster had more than 6. And what Muss loves to do is I've talked about this on the show ad nauseum, but what he loves to do is find the mismatch that he thinks he can exploit and find the mismatch that he thinks he can win and just attack it over and over again. That's why you see guys like JD Notae get all of those shots, because he thinks that he can win that matchup, right? I specifically remember when it was who was the transfer they had from Kent State? Do you remember him 2 years ago? Their first year when they made it to the Elite Eight. Can't remember what his name is, but it was this Elite Eight game,
like the Northern Kentucky kid, Jalen Tate.
Yeah, Jalen Tate. It was the game against Oral Roberts where he must realize that, like, I got this 6'6" guy. He's being guarded by Max Asmus, and he literally just posted him up on like 9 straight possessions, and that's what changed the game. Like, that's what Muss loves to do.
Wow.
And that's what he did with Nick Smith tonight. That's what we saw with Anthony Black and Ricky Council and Maui. And now you're looking at a situation where you basically have 3 guys that you can that you're almost always going to be able to win with. Like, I think Anthony Black's going to be a first-round pick, right? Nick Smith is going to probably be a lottery pick, right? Both of those guys are going to be pros. Wherever you want to pick them, they're going to be pros. I think Ricky Council has played his way into the NBA conversation with his athleticism and the shot making. And now you got 3 of those dudes with a guy that knows how to put players that can win one-on-one in matchups to win one-on-one. And throw in the fact that you got Trevon Brazile out there, and then throw in the fact that Jordan Walsh doesn't give a shit about anything as long as he's able to go out there and lock down somebody's best defender, right? Like, that team, I thought it was going to take them time to figure it out. Like, their freshmen are ready.
Yeah.
They are ready. They're here now. I think they're the best team in the SEC. I know.
SEC.
Yeah. T.O. loves Tennessee, Patrick. T.O. loves Tennessee. But I think it's Arkansas, man. Like, they're good, and they're only going to get, like, those freshmen are going to get better. Like, freshmen get better throughout the season. They're good, man. They're tough.
That length, what they showed in Maui, I'm like, oh my gosh, they're better than last year.
When they go out there and they're playing 6'7" Anthony Black, 6'6" Ricky Council, 6'5" Nick Smith, and then, like, take your pick of 6'10" Trevon Brazile, 6'7" and long Jordan Walsh, any of their bigs, right? Like the Mitchells, Jalen Graham, like, come on now. Like, they're going to be able to switch everything because they're so athletic.
You didn't even mention Devo Davis yet. Like, we haven't even talked about him.
I know, right? Isn't that wild?
How many teams do we talk about on this show and say, man, they just don't have a lot of guys who can go really create their own offense, right? Like, Villanova is a team that has not had a guy who could create their own offense. We talked about Wisconsin earlier in the show. For a team like Wisconsin or like Arkansas to have 3 guys who you can just clear out, play like 1-4 low, and just say, go get one, please. That is such a luxury. It was a luxury now when they had 2 of them. And I'm like, yeah, here's the best NBA prospect in college basketball. Let's just lob him in there. See how.
All right. So we're watching. I'm with you. I think that they're Final Four good. I think that they're national championship good. And I kind of want to keep them, see them keep playing. Right. They're going to be one of those teams where if they make a run in March, I'm not going to hate it. Because 1, they're fun to watch. 2, they have athletes all over the floor, so posters are coming. And 3, the Arkansas fans are nuts. So if we can get like a Final Four with
Arkansas fans in Houston, come on.
It's gonna be something else, man. It's gonna be something else. I'm watching this Houston St. Mary's game. There's about a minute left. Houston's up by 5. Did Marcus Sasser just get hurt? Can someone in the chat let me know? I got it on mute. I just saw him. He's grabbing his shoulder. Did something happen there? If you know what's going on, let us know in the chat. But I do want to talk real quick. We'll get to this game in a second. I want to talk about Memphis first. All right. Memphis knocked off Ole Miss tonight. They haven't had the greatest start to the season. They had that weird game against Seton Hall, right? With the banked in 3 at the buzzer by Tyrese Samuel. I think that Memphis probably should have, could have won that game. But they're old. They guard. They have really good guards. I think that DeAndre Williams is a difference maker. Kendrick Davis came in. He's averaging 20 and 6. Like, not that that's surprising, but he's right there. I think that they're a little bit underrated right now. And I don't want to say that they can compete with Houston for an American championship just because, like, I don't think anyone's going to compete with Houston for very many things. But they're really good.
Yeah, I mean, I think the thing for me with Memphis that's different about this group than the previous years under Penny is there isn't that learning curve, right? Like, I think all these early Penny teams, you watched them and you said, man, like maybe in February, once everyone figures out their roles and guys understand what it takes to win in college basketball, they could be pretty good. And right now in November and December now, as the calendar turns, you look and you say, okay, like this team kind of knows its identity, right? They're going to play in ball screens with DeAndre Williams and Kendrick Davis, two really dynamic players, two really old players, right? DeAndre Williams, I think, is the oldest player in college basketball.
Everybody in their starting lineup is older than you, Sweeney. Everybody in their starting lineup. I'm not even
that's
joking.
True. I don't think they're all over
fifth-year seniors. They're all older than you. You're a child.
I'm a sixth-year senior. Relax. But no, I think right now they're better than Memphis teams have been in November and December. The question is, do they have the ceiling, right? Like where Memphis got to last season, they were one of the better teams in the country. Like when Gonzaga took them out in the NCAA tournament, if Memphis had won that game, they could have went for a while because that team was really, really good and really complete by the end of the year. And I don't know that there's that ceiling with this group because I don't think they have the real scoring ability outside of Davis and Williams that they've had. I don't think they have the overwhelming athleticism that they've had on those two teams to just be monstrous defensively. But I think they're a tournament team without question. And I think they have a very good chance to be a top 25 team. Does that mean they're going to push Houston? I don't think anyone's pushing Houston in the American. But if you maybe pick a second team in that league right now, I'm taking the Tigers.
Yeah, I agree too. I don't think is there a third team? Do we even need to mention a third team? Is there anyone else in the conference worth talking about? I don't think so. Patrick, where do you stand on the Tigers?
I stand. To your point, Sweeney, they're to have that age, that maturity. You would think that they have a chance of making a further run. I do like the fact that this is a much better November, December than last year, November of last year. But I'm looking at this Houston team, how they fly around, and Seth Greenberg said it so well. Kelvin Sampson has gotten his guys to buy into not doing anything more than what you're capable of. Just everyone bought into doing exactly what your job is. I see how they fly around defensively, being there on the catch, using that white line, middle of the that symmetry down the line of the paint, defense, the helps, the rotations, the icing on. I'm like, I truly don't think any team, with regardless in the AAC, has a chance to beat Houston with the way that they play defense. Of course, the ball's not always going to go in, but the defense that Houston brings, there's not going to be a team that's going to overwhelm that.
Yeah, and the one thing I will say is that I always have doubts about teams that can really only defend. But there's two things that make me feel comfortable about backing Houston as like an actual national title contender. And one of those is that they're going to get so many easy points off of offensive rebounds. Like that's just what they do. They get to the offensive glass and they make it work for them. And the other thing is, assuming Marcus Sasser is okay and he came out of the game, there's 12 seconds left. It's pretty much over. But assuming he's okay, he can go get a bucket anytime he needs it. Jamal Mark can go get a bucket. Terrence Arsenault, I think, is a guy that by the end of the year we're going to be talking about as someone that can get you 20 points on a night when you need him to. So they have different ways that they can score, even if a lot of times it's something ugly. Like this is a 53-48 game against St. Mary's, who's good, by the way. But I think that they have some guards. Sweeney, let me ask you this. Gonzaga has some issues this season. I don't think that that's necessarily breaking news, right? I don't love their guards. I don't love what they are defensively right now. And St. Mary's looks like they could be pretty good. I know they just took that loss to New Mexico, but they are a Randy Bennett team, and I'm never going to count a Randy Bennett team out. So is there a chance that this could be a Gale season in the WCC?
I think the chance is better than it's been, just because I think even in years like last year where St. Mary's could split the season series with Gonzaga, there was a zero chance Gonzaga was losing to anyone else. And St. Mary's was going to get pushed by San Francisco, who was really good, Santa Clara, who was really good, BYU. I still think more likely than not, St. Mary's loses to someone in this league, right? Like Portland's really good. We saw that at PK 85. San Francisco 7-1, had a really, really good start to the year under Chris Gerlison. I think it's more likely that St. Mary's loses games to teams not named Gonzaga than it is that Gonzaga loses games to teams not named St. Mary's. But I think St. Mary's has the ability to create some real difficult matchups for Gonzaga, because the one thing that Randy Bennett teams do extremely well is they force you to play their style of basketball, right?
Yeah.
Like if you look back to the game that St. Mary's beat Gonzaga last year, that thing was a slog. It was ugly. It was a grinder, and they just made enough shots. And I think that in that type of game this year, Gonzaga doesn't necessarily have the firepower to win this year. Like they didn't have the firepower to beat St. Mary's last year when St. Mary's executed at a high level. But I think it took a perfect storm. And I think this year it's not going to need A+ St. Mary's and C Gonzaga for them to win that game. So I could see St. Mary's beating Gonzaga once, maybe even twice. But I still think if you're looking at the regular season crown, it's going to be Gonzaga, because St. Mary's is probably going to get picked off like on a road trip to Portland, and I don't think Gonzaga is.
I don't necessarily know if I agree with that on the latter part, right? I think that Gonzaga is beatable. My biggest thing,
I just think they're so hard for. I think it's so hard for mid-major teams to beat Gonzaga, because they have the talent, they have the star power, and they can come at you with their depth, right? Like I just think when you watch Gonzaga, like Gonzaga has not had a struggle in a bye game so far. And I know their bye games have been Portland State, North Florida. Like that's different. But Gonzaga is so dominant in bye games over time. And I think you see that pattern, because I think St. Mary's is more likely to have cool nights and wind up in a 53-48 and all of a sudden lose, right?
The only thing I would say to that is I don't know if San Francisco, I don't know if Portland this year, I don't know if Santa Clara just kind of on overall, I don't know if Pepperdine, who actually has like
super talent,
an intriguing amount of talent. I don't know if they just lost by literally 50 points to UCLA. So I don't know if I necessarily trust them, but it's not like the WCC has a bunch of Portland States.
No, you're right.
It's like there's good teams that when you play in those raucous buildings, it's going to like some of these home courts hold like 3,000, 4,000 people, but they pack every single seat when Gonzaga comes to town. So I think that they're going to get picked off a couple more times this year. And it's just a matter of, can St. Mary's win those? Like, there's going to be one possession games for St. Mary's. Can you win that one possession game at Portland, or do you lose it? Right. So that's kind of where I stand with it. Patrick, we have a lot of chatter in the chat right now about Virginia. People want to know what their ceiling is. People want to know how good this team is. People want to know, can this group, who just struggled through a 62-57 win against a Florida State team that is now 1-9, you got to answer the Virginia question first before you talk about Florida State being 1-9.
All right. Yeah, I will.
What do you think their ceiling is this year? How good can this Tony Bennett team be?
Well, the question mark lies wherein, you have all 5 returning starters from an NIT team that a game like this last year, they lost.
Mm-hmm.
They struggle at times offensively. We know Tony Bennett's style of play forces teams to play to a full shot clock. I think they're going to struggle against length, looking at Florida State being a team that's not as talented this year as we know, and the other hurdles that they face, but just only scoring 21 points in the first half against a Florida State team defense that has been bad all year. You did see early in that second half, they scored 13 points quick in the first 2.5. It's just like, who are you going to get? Are they going to put both sides together? One thing that we can rely on with Virginia is their free throw line rate, their free throw rate. They're going to in the season being a top 10 team at the free throw line. But offensively, I don't know what their ceiling is. I don't think it's very high, even though in that Baylor game they looked great. But we just saw what happened to Baylor against Marquette. So how good is Baylor really right now? What is that win going to mean down the road? I think obviously a tournament team. I don't think there's a large gap of saying that they're running away with the ACC or anything like that right now. I think North Carolina is going to figure things out. They're just too talented to not. I think North Carolina is dealing with a little bit of human nature. A
nice way to say it.
Well, I would just say, I look back at my Florida team, and we were coming back after my junior year. Fortunately, we were able to figure it out super early in the season. But the work that you have to put in, regardless of the outside expectations, you cannot worry about, like, you forget what happened last year, being in the national championship game. You have to work. The mindset needs to be, we need to work 10 times as hard and be even better, so much even better that everyone's back and we have this opportunity in front of us. Because as soon as you were teams salivate at the opportunity to beat the number one team all year long, to have that over your head. But when it comes to, I think Virginia has a chance, has a really good opportunity to be a Sweet 16 team as I'm looking at right now. It's going to depend on matchups. It's really hard to get a team to sit down and play defense for 30 seconds all game long. And because I hated doing that. I hated when we played them every single time. But we were able to come away with wins. We'll see. You just got to start. It was just interesting to see that they struggle with the Florida State team, as you said, that is 1-9. And I hate to see that for little Hamilton, as good as he's been these last few years. I really, really wish we could have seen what that 2020 team would have done. I think that was probably the best team he's had in his tenure. But as we know, that season got ended by COVID. Hopefully when Baba Miller comes back, he's able to play. He'll be a spark for this team to turn things around, not turn things around in the sense of making the tournament, but in the sense of making it. Maybe they can win. Maybe they can mix things up and get an ACC tournament, at least make it to the championship game. But this season has definitely been one of the worst for them.
It's hard for them, man, with so many injuries. Like everything that they do is based on depth and the fact that you just have wave after wave after wave of long, athletic, switchable, strong, tough, 6'8" dudes with 7'2" wingspans. They just got like an endless supply of aliens they throw at you. And there's 13 of them on the roster, and every one of them is going to play just as hard as the guy that's the top.
Where does he get these guys from? Like,
I
seriously.
don't know, man. I don't know. I think all he does is he must go to like the databases where everybody's length is listed and just be like, find me the longest wingspans that you got. If they got a 7'4" wingspan, I don't care about anything else. Give them a scholarship offer. That's got to be what it is. As in terms of Virginia, I think that they are the favorite to win that conference right now. For no other reason than they play Duke once at home. That's it. They also get Louisville twice. They get Florida State twice. They get Boston College twice. They get Syracuse twice. So one of their road games is at Pitt, right? So they have a very fortuitous schedule in terms of the bad teams. In terms of the bad teams in the ACC. I also just think the guys on the roster figured it out this season, Sweeney. Whether it's Jaden Gardner, whether it's Armaan Franklin, and Reese Beekman to me is the difference maker, because now all of a sudden you got a pro on your roster who happens to be your best on-ball defender, who happens to also be someone that can like play a secondary point guard role. Like I just think that he's such a great complementary piece when like you don't necessarily need a leader because you got Kihei out there, right? You don't necessarily need a guy that's going to get you 30 every single night because you got Jaden Gardner who can win a matchup. You got Armaan Franklin who can win a matchup. He just does everything that you need a basketball player to do as like the second best player on the team. So I'm in on Virginia. We're going to find out Saturday, December 17th. We're going to find out. That's when they play Houston.
Yeah, I'm excited about that. I think Beekman's been awesome, like you said. I think though the growth from Armaan Franklin from year 1 to year 2 as a transfer has been critical for this offense. Talk about inconsistent shot making. That was such a story for them last year, just not being able to make shots at a high enough level to win games, especially against good teams. And he's been really, really good. I will say, I think Virginia has looked a lot more mortal the last couple of games after the Baylor domination, where you're like, oh boy, like this team's back to Final Four Tony Bennett, right? And the reason why is that the shooting has cooled off, right? Like early in the season, they were bombs away from three. The last 4 games, they've made 5, 5, 4, and 5 threes. And if this team is just okay shooting the basketball, or it's or maybe it's not even a strength, which we'll see right now, like they're shooting 42% as a team, but at low volume. And a lot of that's those first 3 games. I do worry a little bit about them offensively and getting to that next tier. But I think in the ACC, they're going to be very consistent. Their defense has taken a step forward this year because guys are a little bit more comfortable in the pack line. I think with Gardner and Franklin, that's especially the case. And Beekman is just a complete game record defensively and with the stuff he's able to do. So, yeah, I think they're probably just ahead of Carolina and Duke in the ACC because of the schedule, the stability with them. And I think the lingering questions we have about both Duke and Carolina, but in terms of their national status, I do wonder if maybe we're blowing them up a little bit too much too early, just because I do think the shooting is starting to come back to earth.
Yeah, I don't think that we are right now. I think that they're probably one of the best teams in college basketball right now. I would say Duke
right now, sure, that's fair.
Both have a higher ceiling because they're more talented. But listen, this has been the Field of 68 After Dark. We've been here for an hour. Make sure you check out our merch store, field68.shop. We got a lot of new gear in there. We got a couple new collections coming in. Make sure that if you're listening to this, you subscribe to the Field of 68 Daily. It is the free college basketball newsletter that we have every morning, 8:30 a.m. It is in your inbox, 1,000 words, sometimes more, to get you caught up on everything that's happened in college basketball. And also, Field of 12 After Dark is starting right now over on the Field of 12 YouTube channel. Our producer Trevor is going to drop a link in the chat, maybe in the comments below. So if you're watching this now, head over there because they got a lot to talk about, a lot more interesting stuff too going on. Football championship Saturday. So for Kevin Sweeney, for Patric Young, for our producer Trevor, my name is Rob Dauster.